Thoughts on Bob Chapek getting the boot and Bob Iger returning as CEO at Disney? There's a lot to think on this one. Right off the bat, Disney stock has been tanking this whole last year. As someone that owns a little bit of Disney stock, it has not been on a great path. Now, the stock market in general hasn't been on a good path, but Disney certainly has reasons to be concerned about what's going on. A lot of their stuff has really underperformed, or it doesn't feel like the momentum is in the right direction. So the idea that Chapek got the boot, not terribly surprising. Even when he was announced, a lot of people were concerned. And then all along the way, there's just been rumors, murmurs about all the ways in which people are unhappy. He's not great at dealing with talent. He hasn't handled a number of the controversies in a particularly good way, in which case that's the performance of the company as a whole is not great. He's not fostering good relationships with the employees, and then he's not building trust with the audience. Probably need to make a big change. So what do I think about Bob Iger returning? That's where it gets a lot more complicated, because Bob Iger to me feels like a great businessman that knows how to increase the stock value. And he's smart enough to know that creatives are an important part of that process, but he's not an actual creative visionary himself. His strategy with Disney was, let's see what's working and buy it. So he bought Pixar, he bought Lucasfilm, he bought Marvel, and then he bought Fox. So he bought all these things, drove up the stock price, and then he left. And, these remakes are working. Let's crank out a ton of these. So on the one hand, there's something he's very good at. And because he valued talent enough, a lot of things worked when he was doing that. And there were a lot of wins in there, a lot of movies that I loved. Obviously, phase 3 of the MCU is how I grew this entire channel. But when you're not a visionary and you aren't developing new stories and new properties, you're just going to the ones that you have and just digging deeper, eventually the well runs dry. And you look at Star Wars and Marvel, and I think you start to see that, where when you're trying to put out 4 TV shows per year, you're digging in the well, you're going too deep on a well that's running dry. And they keep doing that, and they're like, okay, now we're going to do these live action remakes, and all of a sudden we get this Pinocchio from a legendary director, a legendary lead actor, and it's terrible because they keep going to the well that's dry. And instead of going like, all right, a couple of these worked, now let's find something new, they're just continuing to try and pull out of these same properties, these same ideas, instead of coming up with something new. And you have to think also, some of the failures of the last 3 years were projects greenlit by Iger. Movies, TV shows have a very long turnaround. So he greenlit stuff back in 2019, 2018, 2017, and that's the stuff that was coming out during Chapek's era. Disney Plus, that's an Iger thing that Chapek then was put over. So if they just need someone that's better working with talent, better at building trust, better at dealing with controversies, they've got a guy that I think is better at all of those things. He's better at running this version of Disney. I don't think this version of running Disney is the future. It's a trend. It needs to be a transition period. And then they need to get a new visionary. They need to get someone in who's not just looking to remake everything that they haven't remade yet. Find 1,000 spin-offs in the world of Star Wars, and every Marvel character left to adapt, and every Pixar project adapted into a spin-off on Disney Plus. Like, they need someone that is pushing them towards coming up with new, inventive, creative stories. And I don't think that's Iger. So I want him to be kind of a transition person of, let's stabilize things. Let's get it back so it's not on the decline. Put talent back in control of power. and then let's get someone in that has that vision for what's next. That's not, I'm going to buy Apple. I'm going to buy Universal. Like, that's what people are talking about on Twitter, that Bob Iger came back because he's going to buy Apple, or he's going to sell Disney to Apple or something like that. Like, and I hear that and I go, right, exactly. That when you think about Bob Iger, you think about these gigantic corporate acquisitions. You don't think of like this just spark of creativity and vision casting. The brands themselves were allowed to have that controlled, so you got a lot of great stuff in there. But for the future of Disney, they need a new strategy that's not continuing to go to these same wells and just running them dry.